Welcome to the Cult Classic Horror Show. Every week, you can have the conversations you've always wanted to have about the films you love.
Shut up!
We're gonna get you. Not another peep. Kinda
Get rid of your distractions and prepare yourself.
Won't then lock your door. 5, 6, gonna crucifix.
You got a big surprise coming to you. You're not going anywhere.
All right, welcome everybody to the Cult Classic Horror Show. I'm one of your hosts, Danny Bonin.
Welcome back to the show, guys. Scotty Bonin back with you here.
We are the Blood
Brothers.
Brothers. Yes.
Good to have you guys. Stretching as we talk.
Oh, yeah.
Put that great stretch out.
After
Loosen
sitting down
up.
watching some movies, we got to stretch out,
Yep.
you know.
Got to stretch the legs and the other leg.
Yeah.
All the legs.
That doesn't make any sense.
I know. Well, I was talking about my third leg.
How do you stretch that?
You just stretch it. Doesn't feel good, but you just do it. Yeah, it's not the greatest feeling.
Okay.
I don't know why you would do it. It just needs it at times.
Stretch it like a piece of gum?
Yeah.
Out of your mouth. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on. All right, so we're still, we're at the end of our George Romero stint here. We used to do months of things, but now before this we decided we're just going to do it till we move on.
We're just going to do stints.
But this is our 8th week in George Romero land, and we're actually going to finish off George Romero next week with an interview.
Yeah, so next week will be the finisher,
the last
finalization
of the George Romero
saga
episodes for now, because he has many more movies that we can come back to that we skipped. We just wanted to hit some of the main ones first time through. But no, next week we'll have an interview with Daniel Beer, who played Randy in Creepshow 2 in the Raft segment.
Yeah.
So he's the one who lives the longest before
getting sucked up by the oil slick or whatever you want to call it.
By the blob.
The blob, the goo.
Sucked up by the blob. When he was getting away, he should have just ran. He gets to the beach and he just sits there and, I made it.
He takes advantage of the girl for no reason at all, and then swims for cover as she's getting swallowed up, and then just stays on the shore. Doesn't keep running. We'll have to give him crap about that.
Yep. So, make sure to tune in next week as we finish out George Romero with an interview with him. And he's got a couple things coming up he's going to talk about, too. So, it'll be a good episode.
Got a good actor on board to interview.
Yeah. But for this episode, we're going to talk about Land of the Dead.
Yes.
I know a lot of you guys out there are like, oh, you need to nail this movie and that movie, and you're going to miss the last couple of the Dead movies. But like I said, we don't want to harp on George Romero too long.
Yeah.
And we just want to move on, and then we'll swing back around. We just started this show in November of last year, and so we got to hit a bunch of...
Yeah, we really want to hit some of the classics that we know, that we love and admire too, and not stick in one segment for a duration.
We don't want to be in one segment for too long in case... God forbid someone out there hates George Romero or something like that. Then they won't listen to our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll round out this episode, next episode, and then we'll move on. And then once we've hit a lot of these ones that we all love and we're familiar with, we'll start digging deep. We'll come back around to some Romero films that are lesser known, even some other films that are lesser known too, that are some of our favorites. So
it'll give you guys a little bit of a variety and touch all the fans out there that are fans of these other movies too, which of course you guys should be, because this is the Cult Classic Horror Show, and all things horror is awesome.
So this Land of the Dead was filmed in 2005.
A new one here. All of George A. Romero's films we've covered have all been
in the 80s or
in the 80s or
older,
70s. So it's 60s even. Night of the Living Dead, 68.
Yeah, and this one was really. I remember when this came out. I mean, now we're getting into, we were born in '85, and so a lot of these earlier films, I wasn't around when they came out, or when they did come out, I was so young that
never watched them.
Mm-hmm. But I actually remember when this one came out, and seeing it in theaters, and it was a good movie, and it was a lot of hoopla at the time because, George Romero hadn't done any of these of the Dead films for so long, and so it was almost like a master back at his craft, and everyone was excited to see what he did.
He's the king of the Dead, and having him back in the boxing ring is just everyone was freaking out. Everyone wanted to work for him, and people praised him.
Well, they talked about how Greg Nicotero and Howard Bergman were on this KMB Effects. By this time, I mean, they're an established, huge effects company out of Hollywood.
Yeah,
that has a big warehouse down there, king of effects. And
they're one of the best in the business for sure.
But they dropped everything they were doing to come work on Land of the Dead because they love Romero so much. They talked about how George and Greg met back in the day.
Yeah, Greg Nicotero as a young kid.
Yeah, I guess George Romero was in Rome working on his Dawn of the Dead script. Mm-hmm. And this little boy or this kid comes up to him. I don't know how little, but how old Greg was at the time. But this kid comes up to him at a restaurant. It says, "Excuse me, sir, are you George Romero?" It's speaking English. They're in Europe, and so what a coincidence that happened to be Greg Nicotero.
Yeah,
and he met his family and everything. And
yes, I am George A. Romero. What's your name, young boy?
We actually have no idea what he said.
But I'm just mimicking. I'm thinking that's what he said.
That's probably close to what he said, I assume.
And I wonder what Greg was doing in Rome as well.
I don't know.
What a coincidence!
Vacationing with the family.
They're both there at the same time.
So,
but he was like his idol and looked up to him, and then later down the road worked with him.
Nicotero grew up in Pittsburgh. Romero came up in Pittsburgh and was producing or creating all these films in Pittsburgh, and so he had a real good local following. And actually, this movie, Land of the Dead, it wasn't filmed in Pittsburgh. It was filmed Canada mainly. But
cold Canada.
But it's supposed to replicate Pittsburgh. It's supposed to have taken to have taken place in Pittsburgh.
And having the same type of skyline layout of the buildings, besides the CGI one that was in the middle. The only one that was working.
Fiddler's Green building was not a real building. It's CGI. Mm-hmm. It's not anywhere that you can go visit. So try to look for it.
And which they really try to do as much less CGI as possible for this movie. Of course, it's 2005 and not 1975 when he did some of his first movies. So he had more technology to use and more things to make it look real, really bloody and gory and realistic. But they still went with the custom, makeup designs and stuff.
Yeah, and they went mechanical on a lot of the effects. They built mechanical zombies. A few things. Yeah, Romero talked about how he really didn't want to do any CG in this film, but it just came down to it, and they had to do for a few things.
Yeah.
But he said just some minor things here and there. One of the actors getting shot through the chin with a nail gun or whatever. It's just he had to do it.
Yeah, and he's talking about they had on hand 100 to 200 zombies at any given moment, but there's points where you have to see more than that. So they had to tile the zombies and layer them, to make it look like there was more. And it gives that effect that this Land of the Dead, that they're taking over a whole city. It's not like it's in Day of the Dead. It was supposed to, I guess it was everywhere, but it was just in that underground area there. So they really had to show a lot more in that big city, which I didn't really mind the CGI there.
No, it's not too noticeable.
I didn't notice it too bad.
But yeah, most of it all is mechanical effects, which is saying something for a film in 2005.
Yeah.
They talk about how it was the highest budget he's worked with up to date on this film. The budget was about 15 to 19 million. They didn't have a solid number.
Wow.
But
compared to like 80,000 for Night of the Living Dead or something.
Yeah, well, and then even God, was it Dawn?
Martin was
even Dawn of the Dead was like
Dawn of the yeah
was in the hundreds of thousands, and I lost the number for Day of the Dead. I probably have it written down here, but
yeah. Here I have it right here.
3.5.
3.5 million.
3.5 million for Day of the Dead. And then he did some films in between, obviously, but now this jumps up to 15 to 19 million. But Romero even said that this was
20 years later from Day of the Dead.
Yeah, this was a lot bigger budget than he's worked with for these films, but it also felt like they were doing things on a shoestring.
Mm-hmm.
They were really doing some guerrilla filming there because
Still.
they had done the remake of Dawn of the Dead just before this, and that actually had a bigger budget. So if you don't include remakes, this had the biggest budget so far of the Dead series. But yeah, the remake of Dawn of the Dead did have a bigger budget and slightly beat Land of the Dead in the box office.
So, and we could have done Dawn of the Dead, the remake, but we did the original, and we wanted to do Land of the Dead.
Yeah.
Just to...
So this Land of the Dead grossed 46 million, about just over 46 million. Very successful.
Mm-hmm. Ebert gave it 3 stars out of 4.
Yeah, but
so he liked it. He thought it was very artistic, and the effects were great. So, and this film gave the fans what they wanted. It was a kind of like a gore fest, almost like Day of the Dead. It was really gory, and there was a lot of great shots of just the zombies feasting and the heads blowing up, and zombies can blow up really, really, really easily if you shoot them right in the head.
Well, and speaking of the gore, this was the first of the Dead series to be released with a rating, an R rating in theaters.
That's right.
Everything else before this was unrated, so they did do an R rating for theaters and then a separate unrated for DVD release. So they had to film things certain ways. I'm not sure the technology of how it works or anything, but the way they filmed things was to make it easy that they could take out certain shots or take out the blood in certain shots, using overlays or overlaps and just so that because they knew they were going to have to deal with that.
Yeah, trimming some of the grisly shots like by a few seconds, or making the blood more black than red. Just stuff like that. That's what sneaks by for the R rating.
Yeah, and speaking of giving the fans what they want, I mean, Nicotero even talked about his favorite scene in the whole movie was when they. It's sort of tough to explain, but they stumble into that sort of army warehouse, and that's where all the military soldiers are eating each other, basically.
Dinner fest.
Yeah, you have the zombies eating the military soldiers. And the flashlight just scans from like one scene to the next.
Yeah.
So basically,
that was freaky, man. I almost looked away at that. I was like, geez.
Basically the flashlight shows on like 2 zombies eating a soldier, then it moves over to a zombie eating a soldier's arm.
Yeah, like the top of the arm.
Yeah.
God.
But it finishes off with that zombie with his arm down that guy's throat.
Oh, yeah.
Pulls something out of his throat.
Intestines or his inside.
Or his heart or something. Yeah. I don't know what, or lung. Yeah, something
blood
from
just
inside.
drops out. I mean, they didn't, that was.
So that was, Nicotero said that was his favorite scene of the whole shoot. He had the best time doing that. And he felt like he was really giving the fans what they wanted with that. Sort of 6 different images or pictures there.
And freakiness. I mean, and I think he hit it right on the dot there, because that's probably the most gruesome part in the entire movie.
Yeah.
And fans love that. And that's what, I mean, that's what makes the movie good, the gore and the zombies and just how it's put together really... You can just see the difference from the films 20 years ago to what he did now. It's so much more technology and plaster and blood, and the makeup's just so much enhanced than it was. Even.
And
he did a great job back then too.
A lot of people talk about that kind of stuff as a negative. I'm talking about people who don't really understand horror or love horror. Maybe they watch it occasionally, and we deal with those people daily. I'm talking about me, Scotty, even you guys as fans. Where people say, "Oh, all that was blood and gore," or that's it's just visual whatever.
Yeah.
And I just say to them, well, yeah, that's what we watch it for. We love the gore. We want to see.
It's awesome.
We want to see the different ways people die. We want to see what effects they used, how they were able to do it. For me, I mean, the more brutal, the better.
Yeah, it's just
I love it.
You walk out of the theater like, oh my god, that was brutal. Oh my fucking shit, dude. What the hell happened there? Like, you just in that brutalness, it's just so freaking awesome. I mean, for us horror fans, that's what we want. And of course, like my girlfriend would hate that.
Yeah,
my fiance, but
But we want to see how they die, and even Tom Savini had his cameo here, and that's what he said coming in. Is they would literally just sit around and talk about ways people could die, and Romero would assign them that. You figure out ways people could die. You guys need to brainstorm, think about ways people could die. And how fun to think of these ways and then have the technology and the knowledge to go then create that death. So you can see why these guys love their job.
And I was saying, that it was, a lot more gorier and there's more blood. But Day of the Dead was actually really gory too. And that was 20 years before this. And literally there were some comparable parts. So they really did just as good of a job back then as they did for this film. Of course, it looked more, believable for Land of the Dead because they had more CGI effects and whatnot. But I love the old school films too. With what they had, they really did a great job. In 2005, that was still 12 years ago.
Yeah,
or 11 years ago. So it was still a while ago. But yeah, that's what the fans love.
Oh, what's that sound?
Holy shit! Oh my god!
My dog's whining. It's so high pitched.
Oh, stop that! I hear a howl in the background.
That means it's time for the horror halftime,
baby.
All right, horror halftime. Here we go, real quick. We're on our meme kick here, but I've been getting into those GIFs lately. If you guys don't know what GIFs are. A file type .gif. So if you ever are scrolling through Facebook and you see those looping, like 3-second videos, that's what a GIF is.
Giphy.
You can mainly find all of them at Giphy.com. Go to Giphy.com. Giphy. I just want you to go find one out, or if you can create one, that would be awesome too.
Yeah, even better.
Take a GIF and post it on our page from Land of the Dead. It has to be from Land of the Dead, and it has to be just your favorite one. And
any moment from Land of the Dead.
We'll pick our favorite one, and we'll award you with some free stuff. So, grab a GIF, throw it up on our page, facebook.com/cultclassichorror, and on Instagram, tag us at cultclassic. I think you can do GIFs on Instagram. I'm not positive about that.
I think so.
But if you can't, at least do it on Facebook.
And if we like your GIF the best, then you will receive something awesome from us.
Yeah. We've been doing shirts lately, but we have some other stuff too that we could send out. So, cool. That concludes the horror halftime. Let's move on. So, we were talking about Tom Savini and his cameo.
Back in action. I love Savini.
Yeah, so obviously...
Right as I saw him, I'm like, there he is.
Yep.
Savini. The handlebar mustache.
And he didn't do effects for this film, but...
Which is sad. But
he's worked with Romero so much before. They're pretty much a dynamic duo.
And Nicotero.
And so he came in, did his cameo, and we saw some behind-the-scenes footage of them getting him all made up and... just catching up on good old times, and those guys they go way back. Nicotero, Savini, George Romero, all these guys that were in Pittsburgh and started out together.
They've kept that friendship and bond together. So like any film that George does, like you're automatically going to see Savini or Nicotero too.
Yeah,
but I love for his cameo here. They resembled his character in the original Dawn of the Dead with the leather jacket and the handlebar mustache. Yeah. And so it's 25 years ago or whatever.
He's the only recurring role of the Dead series.
Yeah, so it was 25 years ago. That's right.
So he played himself from Dawn of the Dead. Now he's been zombified. He's been wandering around for a few years.
He still has his machete that he cut that.
Yeah.
And he wasn't zombified in Dawn of the Dead, but now he is because, he got attacked and whatever. But had his machete still, and split the guy down the center, and so that was cool to see him there.
But apparently, so when they started shooting this film, they had to get all the night shots done first because they started filming in October, and obviously it would be snowing by the time, October, probably November or so. So they want to get the night shots out of the way so they weren't dealing with snow. So they shot 29 nights in a row.
And it was freezing.
Yeah, and it was still cold. I mean, it's not snowing, but it's still cold. So right out the gate, 29 nights in a row, freezing cold, trying to get it done before it snowed.
Everyone was out there, the cast, the makeup guys, the special effects, everyone was there.
Nicotero talks about how now he survived on 3 hours of sleep a night for pretty much all those 29 nights.
18-hour days, always on set, just,
So that was grueling.
Yeah, and then we see some notable actors, John Leguizamo and Dennis Hopper and Simon Baker, and so it was cool. I haven't seen those guys around in a long time, so it was cool to see them in these films. I mean, I grew up watching John Leguizamo,
and of course when they're interviewed, especially Leguizamo, they just everyone says the same stuff about Romero, that he's so easy to work with. He's such a collaborative director. He'll take suggestions from anywhere, and even Romero in his interviews says that too. He says it's a collaboration. I want this to be a collaboration,
and for people to have fun and enjoy being on set. And laughing so that's why people love working for him. Keep coming back. They look up to him because he's so awesome to work with, which is awesome. So and it's so funny to see him in these in these documentaries how he's aged pretty well, but from like 25 years ago in Dawn of the Dead to Land of the Dead, he's got like those big glasses and the white hair. But he's aged well, and he's still alive today.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, probably not looking the best, but still kicking.
Still kicking, baby.
So he wrote his first draft for this film pre 9/11 and was about to submit it like the day before 9/11 happened. He talked about this in an interview, and it happened, and then people only wanted to put out, sort of feel good movies, nothing with too much blood and guts, and especially maybe with people up in a tower and whatever.
Yeah.
So he held off, and it wasn't until obviously a couple years later that they gave the go. But he was ready before that. Then when he finally was looking for someone to pick it up, he originally talked to 20th Century Fox, and they wanted him to release it as Night of the Living Dead. Probably for publicity, you know. And he wouldn't do it. He didn't want to do it. He wanted to call it Dead Reckoning, which is what the truck was called.
What that big loader, that huge truck wrecker.
So his favorite title was Dead Reckoning. Then Fox went back and said, well, how about we do Night of the Living Dead, Dead Reckoning. And he said no, but it was obvious that 20th Century Fox was after the rights to Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
So he ended up not working with them. It's funny that a movie that he did so long ago that was his first thing, and now it was a big deal.
Yeah, it was a big deal
after it.
For them to go after it and them wanting it, but he would not budge. But then they ended up going with Land of the Dead, and it fitted perfect. Who picked it up then?
Well, it's distributed by Warner Brothers.
That's right.
So I think that was the distribution end.
Yeah, instead of 20th Century.
Yeah. But yeah, we didn't get too much notes on it. We saw a lot of cool behind the scenes footage of the effects being made. Some of those mechanical zombies are so cool, the way that they do them. You'll have a zombie. You'd be surprised they'll be filming, but in the background there's 2 or 3 guys controlling the facial expressions and the movement of the zombie. And a lot of times, and they were mostly practical effects. So when a zombie gets shot in the head and blood splatters everywhere, literally what they've done is they've created this zombie and put a skin over it. And then they have the head sort of open, and then they'll insert what they call an air mortar in there and a bunch of blood. And they'll close the head back up almost like a puzzle piece. It almost reminds me of like Alien, when the egg opens and the aliens come out. So they'll close it, they'll fold it back up and piece the pieces together. And then obviously when it shoots, the air mortar goes off, splats blood out the head.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they're mechanically controlling the movements of the zombies, so it'll be leaning back and downward. And it's just crazy how they've come up with that stuff, and I can't even imagine the cost of it.
Yeah, and the way they make when the humans get killed by some of the zombies, the way that they make the molds to look exactly like a human head and body is just amazing. It looks, I mean, back, you know, even in Friday the 13th and some of George A's earlier films, you could totally tell that like the person was like fake. But for this, there was, with a lot of the human kills, they were fake bodies too, but they looked so real, even with like the razor burn and stuff, and the hair and the eyebrows were exactly alike. They did a mold on one of the effects guy, and it looked just like him, and he like smiled like right by it, and it was just amazing how it looked. It was just like a replica.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts though, you're talking about how they use the machines and the contractors, was when the
contractors,
the guy looked, or whatever the things that they're using to make
those contractors,
contractors.
Tell you what,
those damn contractors in these horror films. But the one I'm talking about is when the guy looks over and the zombie does not have a head, and then the head flips up and bites his arm. That was really cool. That
was probably my favorite. Yeah, that was fucking awesome. When I saw that, I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I was like, what the hell?
And I think you guys probably watching this too love that part. I mean, yeah, the guy flips his head back over and bites it was so awesome.
It was like connected by a thread still on by his neck, and then he just bites the guy's arm. And
that part, and then the part that I just fucking cringed at the most was when that zombie, I can't even think about it right now. Mm-hmm. The zombie lady is grabbing onto the dead reckoning, and her fingernails just bend back and off.
Yeah. Oh,
her fingernails just bend right, like chip right off. I'm like, oh god.
Yeah. That
got me the worst.
That make me cringe too.
That got me the worst by like 500% than anything in the movie. I don't know why. I'm just those movies. Fuck.
There's some other horror movies out there where that same thing happens, where they're clawing and the fingernails fall off, and that's just the worst. But this was similar to where the zombies were getting smart, just like Day of the Dead. That guy, you know, in Day of the Dead, he had the gun and could shoot. But it all started with Big Daddy, the big guy at the gas station. That he was the one he was like the leader of all the zombies and getting them from, you know, point A to point B, where the Fiddler's Green was, and, you know, swimming across the lake that was surrounding,
or walking across
it, but yeah, that guy was cool, because and then giving the girl, stopping her from hitting the guy with a bat and giving her the gun, and like, here, use that. So that was
smarter
cool.
breed of zombie, and I'm seeing a lot of similarities here to The Walking Dead. Watching this, because I know you don't really watch Walking Dead.
Yeah, I need to get on that.
If you guys probably some of your cussing Scotty out now, how can we be on the?
I know. I watched
a horror show. He doesn't watch The Walking Dead.
I just need to get around to it. You know,
that's all right.
I want to do it.
Forgive him.
I've watched a few episodes, but I haven't started from the beginning.
But they call them walkers, like they do in Walking Dead. And then this is, I believe, sort of the first instance of no matter what, when you die, they said you become a zombie. Mm-hmm. Now, we didn't really see that happen, I don't think. They mentioned it in the beginning, but then you didn't really see it play out like you do in The Walking Dead. So I just caught the similarities, like, he's calling them walkers, and he said that no matter how they die, if they come back to life, they'll come back to life as zombies. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I guess you could argue.
Very similar.
I guess you could argue that a Night of the Living Dead. You know, probably the reason that this hasn't come up yet is because they just never really talk about this stuff in his movies. Usually, the movie starts and it's going, and it's just you don't even know how.
That's how all of George A start.
You don't even know how this happened, or the logistics of it, or how they're becoming zombies. It's happening.
That's how this one started
So-
too. They just
It
all of a
did,
sudden
and-
people are.
And I think it's just because they had the newscaster say that in the beginning. It's like, no matter how you die, you come back to life. I guess you could argue that in Night of the Living Dead, people that were already dead were just starting to come back to life because they had them in the cemetery, they had them wherever.
Yeah.
So maybe it was a
Coming
thing.
out of the graves. And,
Yeah, maybe it was a thing all along. You don't have to get bitten. It's not really a virus. It's just, it happens to everybody. So.
Yeah.
But I thought that just sort of reminded me. And you have this more of this post-apocalyptic feel with Dead Reckoning, the truck going around and the fences up and all that. And so that was sort of bringing me back to Walking Dead. But one thing that sort of I had in my head was, I guess they have this elite society up in the tower there. I almost, and I guess they're paying these people. So I guess money is still a thing.
I guess, yeah.
Because that was sort of in my mind. I'm like, why do they care about money anymore if everything's gone? But
Yeah.
I guess maybe they have this community and they're still using it for currency. But I assume there's only so much. You can't.
Yeah, and it go, like Cholo, which was Leguizamo's part. He's willing to blow up because he wants his money and he wants to go flee north and like what?
Yeah, but what are you going to do with the money
Yeah, what
once
are you
you
gonna do with
get out of the city? Or I know he wanted to buy a place there, and so that makes sense. But they have this shopping mall, and how are you going to keep it stocked with clothing and jewelry and things that these people can buy?
Soon you're going to run out of utilities and clothing. And I mean, I know that in the movie they go out and runs and bring supplies back, but at some point you're going to have to move somewhere else. But it's it seemed like money shouldn't be an issue because you can go rob a liquor store, you can go rob a bank.
Exactly.
There's a bank there. There's money in there, maybe still, right? But yeah, I mean, it was all the visual or just the idea of what was happening, and that's what
There's
you had to go
definitely a
with.
twist on things from Romero because all the other ones was basically about just surviving, and that's one that I noticed early on is that all his movies up to this point have mainly just been about surviving, figuring out what the hell's going on, and getting out of there. It's been really human versus zombie centered, you know. And then we get to this Land of the Dead, and it's a little bit more. A lot of people talk shit about The Walking Dead because, and I agree sometimes, it's almost just like this show going on, but with zombies. You know what I mean? It was sort of like it's like Pride and Prejudice and zombies. You know?
Oh yeah, that movie.
We went and saw it, and
It was
basically
pretty badass.
it's basically sort of a little bit more action plot of Pride and Prejudice, but then there's just zombies there.
Yeah,
So it's like they have these scenes together and these dramatic parts.
dramatic drama, loving scenes,
and then but then they'll just have to kill a zombie every now and
yeah,
then.
and they have to marry the daughter off to this guy, and then there's a zombie, kill him. Oh, and go back to the nice tea party,
And so that's basically what Walking Dead turns into sometimes. They have this big drama thing going on, and you've totally forgotten that about survival or anything. And then all of a sudden they'll just have to kill a horde of zombies, you know?
Yeah.
And so I felt a little bit of that going on in Land of the Dead.
Yeah.
Because you have the conflict between the guy in the tower and, which I fucking forgot his name already.
Dennis Hopper?
Well, I know Dennis Hopper, but I forgot his character's name.
Yeah.
Dennis Hopper and Leguizamo, you have their conflict going on. You have the class conflict between the guys in the tower and the ghetto at the bottom. And it's sort of just become this thing between them where the zombies aren't really a worry.
Yeah.
But then he does a good job of bringing it back around because the zombies have their own little story.
Yeah.
The guy's leading him, Big Daddy's leading him across, and so it's almost following a couple different stories at once. So they're never totally irrelevant because they have their own story going on. But you just tend to forget about them every now and then with everything else going on.
Yeah, because there's so much going on.
So it was a little bit a different take from Romero because usually it's just all about surviving and interaction with zombies, and that's it. At least I know that's what I noticed while watching it.
Yeah, I there was more going on. Your mind was going in a few different places rather than just focusing on survival. Damn, there's fucking zombies here. Let's survive. Yeah. But there's you're on the wrecker. There's the building. There's this. There's that. So yeah, there was those were in play in my head too. But it was entertaining. I mean, it was definitely a good movie, and for all you fans out there, I know that there's a good fan base for this. So it's I'm glad we were able to cover it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up Land of the Dead. Like we said, just wanted to hit some of the main ones, and we can come back around to George Romero later and do some of the obscure but cool one. You know, Monkey Shines and Tales from the Dark Side, or Tales from the Dark Side. Yeah. I get Tales from the Hood and Tales from the Dark Side mixed up in my mind for some reason. You know, there was even a Creepshow 3 that he did some writing on, but wasn't completely enveloped in. But yeah, plenty of other Romero movies that we can come back around to.
We will be here, guys, so we'll definitely come back to it here in the near future.
So yeah, we'll finish off Romero with an interview, as long as everything goes as planned, an interview next week with Daniel Beer from Creepshow 2. Yes. And we'll get into the details of Creepshow 2, especially the raft segment. So if that's your favorite segment. How it was
like on set and what he experienced. And
what it was like working with Nicotero and Howard Berger. And I don't even know if K&B Effects was a thing yet, but they were there working.
Is he the one that got hypothermia too? Daniel Beer?
Yeah. Actually, we can ask him about that too.
I think he's the one that got hypothermia and had to go carted off to the hospital. And
Yep.
So yeah, that'll be interesting to hear about that too.
Yeah, we can talk about how the guy was booted off, the other effects guy. I forgot his name. I'm looking at my old notes here.
Was it Rich? Something Rich. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll refresh it before we do it. He was also in Point Break, so I might have to rewatch that, the original Point Break.
Daniel Beer?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, with Keanu Reeves and Kurt Russell?
Mm-hmm. That sounds right.
Okay.
Sounds right.
So anyways.
So yeah,
make sure you catch us next week for that interview. Then we'll move on after that, and we'll announce that probably on the Facebook page or something.
Yeah, we'll let the steam build a little bit and let you guys sit wondering what we're going to be covering next.
So thanks for joining us, guys. Oh, also I mentioned this last episode. I put it out on Facebook. We're starting to look for some horror artists. So for some custom T-shirt designs, custom work. But yeah, just keep in mind if you're an artist. Definitely let us know. You can email me at danny@cultclassichorror.com and make sure to include some of your work. Obviously, it needs to be able to go digitally onto like a T-shirt or something.
T-shirt or something physical.
Which you can with anything nowadays. So, shoot us an email if you're an artist and you're interested in doing some design work here and there. Obviously, we'll pay you for it. We can discuss the terms. But yeah, thanks for joining us, you guys. We'll catch you next week.
Yeah, catch you next week for our interview, and have a good one, guys.
Don't you blame the movies. Movies don't create psychos. Movies make psychos more creative.
Oh, yes. There will be blood.